Hi, everyone. I'd like to do a shout out to our sponsor, Bako Diagnostics. Early detection is the single most important factor in improving patient outcomes. The Bako Diagnostics team recognizes how impactful a podiatric physician can be and remains committed to supporting you in your role as the first line of defense in diagnosing conditions of the lower extremity. Thanks to the unwavering support of our clients, Bako Diagnostics has been able to give back to the podiatric community for 16 years by providing podiatric educational resources and advocating for the profession. Bako Diagnostics, helping podiatric physicians keep America on its feet. If you have not yet had the opportunity to utilize Bako Diagnostics services, get started today by sending an email to corporaterelations@bakodx.com. The first 50 podiatry offices who request a starter kit will receive a Dean's Chat mug. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name's Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. Once again, I'm with my co-host, Dr. Jensen and Richey. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
I am doing great. Getting ready for the big game tonight. The Bucks are playing in the in-season tournament. I'm from Milwaukee, and they got their work cut out for them tonight, but can't wait for it.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah, I'm in the clinic and I've got my Britney Spears headphone on. We were just doing a mobile cadaver lab, and we were grateful to Stryker for coming for our students, doing some MIS stuff. So very fun day. All kinds of fun things are happening. I'm really excited about today's interview.
Well, fantastic. We've got a phenomenal guest today. He really needs no introduction. Anybody who is online or at in-person meetings, if there's ever some discussion on medical coding, Dr. Jeffrey Lehrman is usually delivering it. So welcome to Dean's Chat, Dr. Lehrman.
Thank you. Hello, Jeff and Joe. Thanks for having me. Nice to spend time with you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. And Dr. Lehrman, we're fairly informal on Dean's Chat. If it's okay with you, let's go Jeff, Joe, and Jeff.
Of course.
Fantastic.
Well, again, we're so grateful that you were able to spend some time to kind of talk to our audience and get to know you a little bit more. Dr. Lehrman, I've also heard you speak, and you helped me tremendously when I shifted in practice settings. So we're going to start with a brief bio, and then we'll kind of dive into, you have a very fascinating career. So Dr. Lehrman is a podiatrist, but also a certified professional coder and certified professional medical auditor. You operate Lehrman Consulting, which provides guidance regarding coding, compliance, and documentation. And you also serve as a staff liaison at the American Medical Association for CPT Editorial Panel, where you also help decide which codes get created, edited, and deleted, which, again, I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about how you got into all of that. But before we dive into that, we'll start with you graduated from Yersinia College. Did I say that correct?
It's Ursinus. It's a small liberal arts school right outside Philadelphia.
All right. And your degree was in biology and sociology. Tell us a little bit about your undergrad.
Ursinus was small. I'm from Philadelphia. I grew up in Philadelphia. At the time, I wanted to stay close to home. Now, as an adult, I know that's probably small-minded. I would like for my own children to go see other parts of the country and the world. But I certainly don't regret it. It got me where I wanted to go. I wanted to stay close to home. I wanted to be able to drive home on Sundays to watch football with my father, which is also probably an immature, short-sighted thing. That's what was important to me when I was 18. And I liked the small school feel and pre-med, and that's how I ended up at Ursinus.
Yeah. How did you find out about podiatry?
Oh, my gosh. Ursinus had a very strong pre-med program. And I had not thought about this in a really long time, and it's really cool that they did this, actually. They had career fairs where they would invite alumni back to talk about what they do. We also had a pre-medical society. I recently went back and spoke at that, which was really cool. And the pre-medical society would bring in providers of different types to talk to the pre-medical society about their specialty. So that allowed for exposure to lots of different specialty types. This is an interesting point, as if anybody's watching the recording, we're recording this in December of 2024 when recruiting students to apply to our schools is a really big deal. And you keep hearing about outreach and hearing from providers being the key. And here I am. I'm telling the story that I ended up there because somebody came and talked about it, who was a podiatrist. So providers of different types came and talked about what they did. Was something that was very appealing to me was the people that ran their own practices. And you don't have to be a podiatrist to do that. But I really liked the people who were their own boss. That was very appealing to me for lots of reasons. That narrowed it down for me. And then when we got to do more rotations and spend time with people still in undergrad, I liked surgery and I liked inpatient care. And then as I explored the different options, the versatility that I found in podiatry, that there were different ways you could go. You could do all office, you could do all hospital, you could do some office, some hospital. That appealed to me, and that's when I landed there. So for podiatrists that are watching this, oftentimes patients say, how did you end up as a foot doctor? And I'm like, well, it wasn't the body part. It wasn't the foot. That was not a thing for me. I liked what the specialty looked like when I was in undergrad.
Fantastic. It's interesting to hear some of the programs that had been maybe a little more popular and kind of disappeared, or maybe just haven't been as present. But the fact that that had such a big impact, I think, is awesome. What are your thoughts, Jeff?
Oh, I think so too. It's amazing. It's almost like time stands still sometimes, Jeff, because when I was going into podiatry school, we had a family podiatrist in Madison, Wisconsin, and we just loved him. He was like the podiatrist to the running community. He was doing foot surgery, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. And then one thing leads to another. Next thing you know, you're taking organic chemistry and the MCAT, and next thing you know, I was in California going to podiatry school. But you went to Ohio, right?
I did, yeah. I'm from Philadelphia. And so I said when I went to undergrad, I wanted to stay close to home. When I got done with that, I realized maybe it's time to go learn more about the rest of the world. And yeah, Cleveland was really good for me. I think it's a little different now, though. When I made that decision, I did so always with the intent of coming home when I was done. I did not know at the time that there were some residency programs that had, I don't know what the right word is, allegiances, connections, whatever, with the Temple School. And when it was time to try to come back home, then it was this business of, well, they only take from Temple, whether that was true or rumor, who knows, or they haven't taken anybody from other than Temple in the last 10 years, which that could be fact and not rumor. And then it was like, oh, maybe going away. But it worked out. I got back home for residency.
That's fabulous, because that's not easy to do. It
wasn't at the time. No, it was not good.
So tell us how you did it. I mean, did you do a rotation there? Did you, did you just rank you and you matched, or how did that work?
I was gonna say I got lucky, but I don't know. That feels like an unfair thing to say to people who maybe didn't end up where they wanted to be. It was Crozier. Crozier Keystone Health System is where I did my training. I had not done. So I think it still works this way. We're talking about 2001 right now. We did externships during our fourth year, and that gives you an opportunity to see them and them an opportunity to see you. And oftentimes where you did your externship played a role in what your prospects were for getting residency. I did not extern there. I did do all my externships in Philadelphia, but you could visit, right? So I had done a one-day visit, and I think it went well. And then I went for the interview, and it worked out.
That's fabulous. And as Joe can attest, nowadays, where you do your clerkships or externships, they're synonymous. It's an audition rotation both ways, right?
Yeah.
And when you have fewer students in classes graduating, they really have an advantage going into the match. And so it hasn't changed, although the pendulum swings with the number of students and the number of residency programs. So no, that's fabulous. There's nothing better than matching with a program that you've dreamed to go to or really want to in the right location. Joe, you did the same thing?
Yeah, but I also really love, Jeff, that you had talked about, you had visited the program, because we tell students all the time, visiting can be very powerful. And I tell students, you may not know in half a day if it's the program for you, but you will know if it's not the program for you. Like, it doesn't take too much time to figure out, like, you know what, this one is not for me. And again, keep that to yourself, but to get a little bit of an exposure, a little bit of an experience. And in your case, it was actually something that really probably helped your faculty get to know you, even though it was just a day. And in that interview process, you can say things like, I wasn't able to do an externship, but I came and I visited it. And it shows them that you're interested, which again, I think is wonderful.
Well, man, if there's I can't agree enough. If there's students watching this, I mean, for me, if we're telling my story, it was 3/4 of a day that set the stage for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And that's not an exaggeration. Crozier was hugely important to me. Yeah. And it's funny you're saying this, because my residency director, and he's right, that was a really big thing for him. If it was, so we were Philadelphia, if it was an applicant from the Philadelphia school and they didn't visit or extern, he was like, how could you know that you're going to spend 3 formative, important years here? And he would add, and so I trained residents for 14 years at Crozier and went to the interview every year. Yeah, every year. And if it was a Temple student who didn't extern or visit, my residency director asked, why didn't you visit? And I don't know if there was ever a reason that was acceptable to him or me, frankly, that made sense. Like, the school, I think they let you out. There's ways to make it happen.
Always.
That hasn't changed either, because we have the Creighton program here in Phoenix. Dr. Roth, phenomenal residency director. But if a student from Arizona hasn't taken the time to just drive across town and visit, he's not considering them. So hopefully our students are watching this, Joe.
Yeah. And when I was in the Bay Area, I'll say the same thing. There's a school there, and we would have students that would interview. If they didn't do an externship, it's just such an easy question. Hey, you were across the street for 3-4 years. Why didn't you just come take a visit? Like, if you're that interested, why didn't you show up?
That's good stuff. And that's just time-tested success stories. There's no doubt about that. So, Jeff, I have a question for you. Having had the opportunity to hear you speak many times, and we were together in Colorado just, 6 weeks ago or so. You're a dynamic speaker. Have you always been? Did you learn that? How did you have such a presence on the stage?
Thank you. I got to credit my dad. My father did a lot of public speaking in his job. I learned from watching him a lot, and I've done a lot of training on it. It's a big part of what I do. It's important to me to be trained and have professionalism in it. So I've taken some courses, and then it feels lame to say, but it's true, and I've learned so much from it. There's tons of stuff online that's free. So Stanford Business School has, I'm not promoting here, I'm just sharing. Stanford Business School has some online stuff. The professor's name is Matt Abrahams. I have no relationship with him. I'm not just sharing stuff. This guy's been so influential to me, Matt Abrahams, and it's free. It's awesome. I joke with my wife that I'm getting a halfway free Stanford MBA. So I've learned a ton from Matt Abrahams on public speaking and communication, and there's another guy whose name is Carmine Gallo, Gallo. He read a book called, I think the title is Communicating the Steve Jobs Way, and I learned a tremendous amount from those two. So I studied it.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say, I have to plug, because you're also incredibly humble. Looking through your CV, you've had over 800 invited lectures. And again, I think everyone who's listening to this that is a podiatrist recognizes your name and has enjoyed some of your lectures. But I'll go back to you, Jeff, for your question just a second. But I'd love to get, your dad was a public speaker, which is really interesting to me. What else in terms of what is it about speaking that has been like a passion, or why did you decide to start down that road? Was there other things?
Well, I want to teach coding. I want to teach compliance. My passion and now my profession is helping our colleagues to know the rules and to follow the rules and to teach people how to do this properly. And that's one really good format to do it. That is an opportunity to share information that we have, right? No different than somebody that's teaching surgery. That's where a lot of that education is provided. So if you say, I have a coding certification, I can teach coding, and I want to, the forum to do that often is in front of a room on a podium where people are sitting in the audience. So that's where it took me. And when it became clear that's what a lot of this was going to be, I wanted to get good at it.
And I'm curious how the interest in coding started.
I ran my own private practice with somebody else for 14 years. For the last many of those years, I was a medical director at a hospital outpatient department wound healing center. I am a rule-oriented person. I like knowing the rules and following the rules. So just in running my own practice, I just wanted to do stuff right. And that started me in trying to find answers to this stuff. I have to credit one of my attendings in residency, Dr. Dave Samuel, who, all these rotations and going through 3 years of residency, he was the one that was talking about it. And it's good. You got to learn surgery and how to be a doctor too. But he really was the first one to even make me realize that this was something that you had to know. I, by nature, just wanted to know the rules. And that led me to looking for stuff and reading the introduction section to the CPT book and reading other appropriate references. There are inappropriate references, which I hope we're going to get to at some point here. And then if you're a member of the American Podiatric Medical Association, every year they send out a thing that says, do you want to serve on a committee? And if you do, apply. So I applied to volunteer to serve on the coding committee. And I was accepted, and I did that. And that leads to opportunities to write and speak and do webinars. And that's where I quickly realized there was a tremendous, and still today, unmet need among providers, manufacturers, distributors, inventors, to know where to go to get the appropriate answers. And I learned then, in starting to do the coding committee stuff, that there was way too much of I heard, or this one said, or I read in a chat, whatever nonsense somewhere. And that's not how it's done. All right, so now you're getting to my passion point, but that's what got me there. There's more to the story, but I'll stop there because I'm going beyond what you asked me.
But that's okay.
We love the passion, and we'll get back to Jeff's question in a second. Keep going. So the need, there's definitely a need.
Yeah, so lots of speaking and writing, and then that the more that you do, the more feedback you get, and people want you to do more, and there started to be a demand to help people with this, and that's when I realized this. I couldn't do both anymore, and then this. I'm a little embarrassed, but I'll share my story. It got to the point where I would come into my office, which was a full-time job, to see patients, and I'd have sticky notes on my desk where I'm supposed to be, like planning surgery and seeing patients and documenting notes. So-and-so from wherever called and has a coding question. And it was happening a ton. And in the beginning, I didn't treat it properly. My approach was like, oh my gosh, I can't, how I'm supposed to be working. I can't. It got to the point that like I could do that. I don't know if all day is an exaggeration, but I could spend a lot of time doing that instead of working, which is fun. But then my children wouldn't be able to go to college one day. So that's when I started to transition to doing it professionally. Instead of coming into the office and looking at the sticky notes and saying, oh my gosh, how am I going to do all this? And that's what I was doing wrong. That's the part I'm embarrassed about. And frankly, I should have realized it sooner that the people want this, so let's do it, right, as a career. So I got my coding certification and got my auditing certification and started to provide the services that people wanted in a professional manner. And I love doing it, and I like teaching, and I like helping colleagues, and then slowly transitioned to then I started my own company, and that became a full-time job. I still see patients today in 2024, 1 or 2 days a week, depending on the time of year. Mostly it's 1 day a week. But now I do that full time. And providers and large groups and manufacturers and inventors who say, I have this gizmo, is there a code for this? And if there isn't, can you help me develop a code? And what are the coverage policies surrounding this service? And same with manufacturers. A company, the inventor might invent the gizmo and want to know what the coding is, but a company might have a thing that they are trying to get providers to use, and the providers ask, well, what's the code for that? I would prefer that they went to me or a more appropriate source than the manufacturer or the salesperson, but that's what happens. So then these manufacturers use me to help them provide compliant, appropriate, correct answers from the appropriate sources. And for example, like help them with their leave behinds, their brochure with the coding information, helping to ensure that it's accurate and up to date and providing appropriate guidance for our colleagues.
Love it. So I was going to ask a question, and you answered it over the last few minutes. Your passion is evident, Jeff. And so when you and I were in Colorado, I was at your lecture, and I was going to ask, how do you get up for every lecture? How do you entertain? Because it's not a boring lecture. It's you're engaging the crowd. You're tying in all the things you learned from the Stanford Business School, and I just thought it was awesome. So you already kind of offered, but I wanted to go further down the road. What's the difference between an appropriate and an inappropriate reference?
Oh, okay. So almost every coding question has one correct answer from an appropriate source. There is almost zero room for opinion in coding. There's texts and references and real places to go for these answers. If somebody wanted to know how to spell a word, they would not go onto a chat-based whatever nonsense chat room and say, how does everybody else spell this? They would use a dictionary, because a dictionary is where you go to learn how to spell words. And the CPT book provides reference on how to CPT code. There is a free online ICD-10 clinical modification manual from the World Health Organization that teaches how to ICD-10 code. It's free. The National Correct Coding Initiative Policy Manual is free and online and provides tons and tons and tons of guidance. I say this all the time. When people ask, I'm new to this, where do I start? Or my practice just assigned me to be the coding person, where do I start? Or you know a lot about coding, I'd like to know that much, where do I start? My answer is the National, I'm saying this slow in case somebody's writing it down, the National Correct Coding Initiative Policy Manual. It is free, it is online, there is so much good content in there, there's so much meat in there. And you go in these dumb forums and chat rooms where people are going back and forth about whose opinion, and I heard, and this one said, and I think it should be this. And you say, oh my gosh, there's an answer. Chapter 4, Section G, Point 2 of the National Correct Coding Initiative Manual states, I just made that up, but most of the time there's an answer. And people are going back and forth on their opinion. So there's other references. I rattled off 3 of the big ones. Most coding questions have one real answer from an appropriate source, and most of them are free. CPT, that's the American Medical Association owns CPT. They are very protective. They make you pay for almost everything. Brand new book every year. Nothing's online. So that's different. That you got to buy the books. That's an AMA problem. Yeah, it feels problematic to me because we got to have it. It's like it seems they're holding it hostage sometimes. But a lot of it's free.
So really it's black and white. It's like there, and there, spelling them, right? I mean, there's different ways at different times, and boom, the answer's there.
Almost, and sometimes people paint me into a corner and we can find some gray, so I'm careful to say almost every single coding question, yes, is a there situation where there's one answer.
I love it. That's fabulous. Now I see where you have your passion. I get it.
Well, we have colleagues messing it up and doing it wrong. And, then they come to me and I have a problem. The payer's going after me for whatever. And I did this. Well, where'd you get that? Well, I always heard, come on. Or my residency director always said, that's not how business is done.
Exactly.
I'd love to jump on that one if
Go
that's
ahead.
possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I often get asked by residents more than students, when they're starting to make that transition, they're starting to think about their next phase of their career. What advice would you give a third-year resident? Maybe they had a lot of coding and private practice exposure. Maybe they had none in their training that they got. when do they start looking for references? Is it better to have a little experience under your belt and then take a course? Or is it better to start right out of the gate in residency, maybe even before they've started, to start this process? What are your thoughts?
I'm going to answer you, but I'm going to go a step behind that. You asked to the person that's graduating residency. Before we get to that, but I'm going to answer you. I would suggest the more important discussion is to explain to them that they have options. I didn't know that. I thought if you're a doctor, you do your own coding. To explain that they have options. The great majority of doctors don't function the way many of our colleagues do. They don't know anything about coding. They don't want to know. They see a patient, they provide care, they create a note, and they're done. And the note gets sent to a coder. There's tons of professional coders, and the coder reads the content of the note and pulls out the codes. And they don't know anything about coding. There are advantages and disadvantages to that model, and I have a lot of thoughts on those. So I think the first thing is to explain you have options. You don't have to do this yourself. You can, and there are advantages to that, and I think there's disadvantages to sending it out. But if you're going to do it yourself, you must do it correctly and in a compliant manner. And so now I'll answer your question. So if the person chooses to do it themselves, yes, I suggest doing it before you graduate. July 1, your first day of work, is not the time to start figuring this stuff out, because then it comes fast, and then there's people in the waiting room, and then it's no good. So yes, I suggest starting early. Then the problem is the question becomes how early, right? Because it's a very common thing. I hear it very frequently. We never get this in school. How are we supposed to know this? So then I go back to my first of, well, you don't have to. You chose to do it yourself. And if you do, fine. But so when to start is a challenge. It is very difficult for students, in my experience, to want to do this. Like, to exaggerate it, right? A first-year student's trying to memorize the Krebs cycle. The furthest, that is very difficult, right? So one of my clients is the American Podiatric Medical Association. I do lots of work for them. We do tons of coding stuff, and it's free for students, and the attendance rate is poor. But when they do market research and how can we appeal to you, and oftentimes the feedback from the students is, on the one hand, we're hearing we never got that in school, but on the other hand, when we talk to them when they are in school, that's not where their head is, which I get. I wouldn't even understand that when I'm trying to memorize the Krebs cycle and doing whatever else we did.
Lower extremity anatomy is calling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. No, that makes perfect sense. Go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say, how often does it change, or how? Because I think that's certainly something that I have told students, and maybe this is incorrect on my part, that I'll tell them, as a student, it doesn't seem to make sense to try to really learn the system, even if it could help them in residency, because there's potential that it will continue to change and evolve. But maybe I'm misleading them. Enlighten
Not that much.
Okay.
There are very specific changes every year, and every single year I do at least 30 minutes on CPT changes for podiatrists and another 30 minutes on ICD-10 changes for podiatrists, and probably another 30 minutes on policy changes for podiatrists. So stuff changes. The basics don't change. The format doesn't change. I've had some residencies ask me come teach them, and I'm just teaching what are CPT codes, what are ICD-10 codes, what are HCPCS level 2 codes, what are the books, what are the resources. And I'm less teaching them how to code for a lapidus bunionectomy, but more teaching them that there are real references, there are rules, and these are the basics, and this is where to go to get that guidance. And then, yeah, there's changes every year, but it's not that much. Like, I hear from providers a lot, this stuff changes all the time. How am I supposed to keep up with this? It really doesn't. Like, the routine foot care rules haven't changed in decades. And, yeah, like what needs to be in the note when you do an ulcer debridement? I've been given that same lecture for at least 10 years. That doesn't change that much. Ulcer debridement coding hasn't changed since 2010. There was a big change January 1, 2010. Coding, documentation different, but coding for routine foot care hasn't changed since I started doing this in 2001. So there's small changes, but it's not that much.
All right. That's good to know. Because again, when students ask me, maybe I will direct them differently. So what are the resources you think would be best at a student level compared to maybe a provider or resident? Or would you say they're the same?
All right. So I already said it, but now I'm going to promote the APMA. The American Podiatric Medical Association is a client of mine. I serve as an advisor to the APMA. So I think the APMA is really great and has great resources. I contributed to and developed a lot of them. I should disclose. Students are APMA members for free, and they have access to free on-demand coding webinars. There are dozens and dozens of them. There are 2 different webinar series available to APMA members of basics. I think one is called Coding Basics and one is called Back to Basics. There's so much content there. They could have such a good time with that. If they're it's on demand, pause, rewind, watch whenever. The slides are there. So for a student, I would suggest that's a really good place to start. And you asked a really good question. My answer would not be the same for a provider, although there's probably plenty of content there for them too. Same thing, there's webinars there. Maybe they don't want to go to the basics webinars. And I'll repeat, the National Correct Coding Initiative Policy Manual, which has so much stuff. And it's online, which means it's searchable. So if you open it and you're intimidated by it because it's really long, you say, I'm not going to read this whole thing. All right, well, if you have a question on Monday about coding for some kind of tendon something, there's chapters. You could go into the musculoskeletal section and do a search within document function, and that will narrow it down, right? Like, I give an example of strapping. People ask a lot. I did this in a strapping. Can I submit both? Well, if you go in the musculoskeletal chapter, the only place it's going to be, right? It's not in the endocrine section. It's not in the integumentary chapter. And you do a word search for strapping. There's 4 results. So how hard is that to move through the 4 things? And the answer to the question is there.
You know, Jeff, we don't make these required homework assignments watching Dean's Chat at the Arizona College, but we might have to make this episode required, Joe.
I've got 4 students in clinic right now, and I know what we're doing on Thursday.
Oh, I like that.
Well, I didn't do anything yet other than rant about they shouldn't be Googling or asking in their chat rooms how to get these things.
Sometimes the more you simplify things, the better the info and the more it's retained. You know how that goes. Can I take a minute to do a little shout out to our sponsor here, Bako Diagnostics. We all know that early detection is the most important determination in improving patient outcomes. Bako Diagnostics remains committed to supporting you in your role as the first line of defense in diagnosing lower extremity pathologies. Bako Diagnostics, helping podiatric physicians keep America on its feet. Jeff, I can't say enough great things about Bako. I mean, they're helping sponsor the podcast, of course, but at every single level of our profession, they give back, from the students to the residents to the practitioners. And you have a relationship with Bako also. You're one of their clinical consultants.
Yeah, much more coding now. You're right. I think the title is clinical consultant. I spend a lot more time reading policy than I do reading peer-reviewed literature and dermatology text, to be honest. So. But yes, they do use me to help them with coding stuff. Like, for example, a couple of years ago, I'm not going to guess. I don't remember what year it was. A couple of years ago, there was a major change to biopsy coding. That we got brand new codes for punch biopsies, brand new codes for tangential biopsies. So I help them provide education to their users because it's in everybody's best interest, including the lab, to make sure everybody's coding for that stuff correctly. So they do use me to help with their coding education, checking their leave behinds, because they have some coding stuff in some of their literature, and I help to make sure it's all correct and help them with the development of that.
That's fantastic. And that just goes to show you it's just another way they're giving back to the community.
Yeah.
All right. So continuing with this interview, our audience wants to know what makes that guy who talks about coding click, right? So you moved to Colorado. Not so, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, 6 years ago in 2018. So I'm from Philadelphia. I'm very much a Philadelphia guy. I belong in Philadelphia. My wife wanted to move to Colorado for a very long time for all the Colorado reasons, the outdoor stuff and the weather and it's great. When my career shifted to doing this full time, I was no longer anchored. We could live anywhere, and that's what led to the move. And it's great. And I go home a lot.
That's fabulous. Are you a Bronco fan yet?
No, come on, no.
A different conference.
No, I am a Philadelphia guy.
So Joe is an Arizona Cardinal fan. I'm a
But
Packer.
I feel you, because we moved to San Francisco, and there is no switching. You stay loyal to your team,
You're
even
in the division.
through those tough years.
Yeah.
My wife grew up in Green Bay, and when they would go to church on Sunday, they would wear their jerseys, and the priest would let them out early to make sure they could get back home in time for the kickoff. So,
right on.
You know, they always say that soccer is not really a sport; it's a religion. But it's true with football around the country too.
That's right.
So the Eagles are your team.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen this year, Jeff?
No predictions.
No. All right. Well, I thought I'd ask because it might be we could have like a little friendly bet if the Eagles and the Packers end up playing each other. So
they may very well.
They could. So when you're not reading code, giving lectures around the country, formulating new presentations, what do you do for fun?
Oh, I have 3 teenage children, and it is so fun. Their activities and going to their stuff and watching their stuff and their friends, and it's really all I want to do right now is watch high school wrestling. I could watch my son and his buddies and go to their meets and watch my daughter do gymnastics practice all day. I love it.
Oh my
kids are 17, 15, and 12, and watching and going to and all their things are super fun. So we're recording this in December. It's high school wrestling season for my boy, and I love it. I love it. I love it so much.
Oh my gosh, that's so nice. My son and his wife live in Loveland, right at the base of the Big Thompson Canyon, right? And so they're raising their 2 little kids in Loveland. So we get back once in a while. We're going to have to connect and do some dinner or something.
Loveland, Colorado?
Yeah, probably 15 miles from you.
Okay, yeah, it's super cool. I'm thinking about that. I thought you were going to tell me something about Loveland wrestling because I'm very familiar with the Loveland high school wrestling team.
Oh, no. My grandkids are like 4 and 1, Jeff. They're not competing yet.
Okay, super fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Joe's got 2. So I've got the oldest kids. You've got the middle. Joe's got the younger ones.
But I'm also in that really fun age. They're 6 and almost 9. And so like they want us around and like all the things that are fun and wonderful. And yeah, absolutely.
All of it's fun. Every stage is fun. It's super fun. This is really fun. I love it. I love going to their stuff.
So how about some quick answer questions? So with all your travels, what's your favorite city to travel to?
Washington, D.C., because I'm a runner and I love running there.
Where do you like to run?
The national
the mall
stuff.
Oh, I love it. Awesome.
Are you a trail runner?
No, I'm old and scared of stepping on a rock. I like running on streets.
Okay. No, just in Colorado, it's like the trail running capital.
I know. I don't do it. No.
All right. That's fair. Okay.
All right. Wait, I got one.
Joe.
One. If we're going to do round robin questions. All right. So love to travel. What's the strangest food you've ever eaten?
Oh, it's not a food, but the first thing that came to mind was in San Antonio. They turn a beer upside down into something else. I'm not very adventurous with food because I'm a vegetarian, which I know is lame.
No, I'm a vegetarian. You're good.
Oh, that's my answer. I like turning a beer into a margarita. That's not as I know that's not. It was something crazy. I don't remember what it was. I couldn't believe they were doing it. It was in San Antonio, and something got turned upside down into something else, and it blew my mind.
All right, I'll take that.
All right, I got one for you, Jeff. Taste in music.
Oh, wow. Bon Jovi. I'm the 80s from Philadelphia, like pop music, classic, 80s rock stuff.
Is that what you would play in the OR?
I'm no fun. No, I don't like funny business. And no music in the OR for me. Yeah, the compliant side of me is not fun. I'm not looking for games at work. I just want to work. I never liked music in the operating room. And when I said do whatever you want, for the staff, but I was not one of those people.
Fair enough. You weren't dialed into the music. That's all right.
Yeah, or a curmudgeon, or maybe both.
Well, I got another one for you. What's your favorite part of training residents back when you were in Philadelphia?
Oh, It's what I miss the most. You asked for quick questions. I could talk about training residents forever. My favorite thing about training residents is I learned more from them than they learned from me.
Absolutely.
They kept me young. They taught me stuff. They inspired me. I loved it. It's the favorite part of for a very long time when people said, "What's your favorite part of my job?" That was my answer.
I agree.
That's a great answer.
I think we'll make a little snippet of that, Jeff.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Well, hang on. I've got one more, and this doesn't have to be a short answer because it was a curiosity that I didn't know if we'd have time, and we probably have enough time to broach this topic. AI and coding. What do you see in terms of, you had already talked about searchable documents, and that alone is massive. But what do you see in the future?
Well, all right. I'm going to think about the coding thing while I answer. What's here now, and this is, again, December of 2024 with AI, is documentation. There are AI tools to assist with documentation that are already really, really good.
Yeah.
Like, very impressive. I mean, even a year ago, I think I would have said, it's like asking Siri a question. It never works. That is not the case anymore. There are programs, there is software that it can list. All you do is put your tablet or whatever hardware it is, put your thing down, push the button, and have the encounter in a HIPAA-compliant manner. And it listens, and it creates the note. And then when you go back and check it and there's stuff you don't like and you change things, it learns from what you guys are shaking your heads like you already know, but maybe some audience people don't know this. It learns from the changes that you make so that it doesn't, maybe there's a word you don't like, that it won't do it again next time. Very impressive. Still needs to be checked. Recently attended a risk management thing with legal representation that said you are still ultimately responsible for every word in that note. So you can't do like, well, but the thing you're still responsible. That's crazy. Crazy impressive and really good. I don't know from coding, but I imagine the way this is evolving, if it can do that, why can't it also learn how to code, right? Like why? And this is going beyond my knowledge or understanding, but why can't you feed it an operative note?
Yeah.
And it pulls out the coding. Still, I'm going to say I would want somebody who knows what they're doing checking it. But I imagine that's where it's headed. I don't know what's going to happen on the coding side, but the possibilities are pretty cool.
And I'm curious because I've worked in several different practice settings where sometimes people were doing coding for me and I would spot check and audit. And that is really how I started to learn. And again, that's when I was first introduced to some of your webinars. And so even in having a human do the coding, if we're having to double check it, the appeal of having AI there to even just generate the note, I mean, that time saving, I think there's a lot of exciting things in the horizon. So thank you. I was curious your take on all that.
Jeff, I was nodding my head because I wasn't thinking about coding and AI. I was thinking about the conversation we had with Dr. Lundquist, who works with NABLA, and he was telling us it was changing the doctor's mindset on practice and retirement and longevity in their profession, because the one thing they hated to do, electronic medical records.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that make sense to me?
That's a good thing. Yeah, that's good.
All right. Jeff, we thank you for joining us. We're running a little short on time. Joe, anything last questions for Jeff?
My last question is there anything that you want to talk to our audience about that we haven't asked you? Or any things that you think are key for people to be aware of?
The big thing I wanted to get out is there's almost no room for opinion. There are resources for this stuff. Chat rooms is not the places to go and ask, what is everybody else doing? So my answer to your question is no, because I got out what I wanted to get out.
And if people want to find you to connect with you or get information about webinars or conferences, where can they find you?
I'm going to answer you, but I thought of something else. I thought of something else. There was another thing, because I made some notes. There was another thing. There are hundreds of third-party payers in the country, of medical insurance companies in the country. And each payer has its own coverage policies. There may be copying and pasting. There may be overlap. There may be 5 that have the same stuff. But each one gets to make its own determination as far as things that are covered. And people very often ask the wrong question, which leads to them getting the wrong answer. And the question is it covered for me to do this? Or if a podiatrist does that, is it covered? And the answer is, it differs based on the payer. You could have two patients in the same office under the same roof with two different medical insurance companies, from the provider's perspective, two different third-party payers with two different sets of rules and they could have the same presentation, the same pathology, the same everything, but the rules about what's covered and when it's covered and how often it's covered and how frequently you could do it and when you can repeat it and what needs to be in the note are different for those two patients because they have two different insurance companies. So asking, is this covered, is wrong. Asking, does Medicare cover that, is wrong because there's different Medicare contractors based on geography. So normally the answer is, the only way to know if Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, making that up, covers that is to ask Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota. There's very rarely one umbrella answer that applies to every provider in the country for every insurance company in the country. And that ties into where to go for the answers. You asked how to get me. I'm not looking to push anything or market services. I think I'm embarrassed. My company does not have a website. I have a reason for that. That's a whole other discussion. Can I give social?
Yes.
All right, that's good. That's the best way. So if somebody's looking for me, I'm going to give Twitter and Instagram. So my Twitter handle is @Dr. Lehrman. So for doctor. So @DrLehrman. I'm cheating and looking at my phone if you can't tell. And on Instagram, it is all written out, Dr. Lehrman, DoctorLehrman. And that's the best way to get me. I look at them more than I should. I'm on there, not answering opinion questions about coding. I'm reading about the Phillies.
And the Eagles.
So that's the best way to get me if somebody wants to get me.
That's fantastic. Well, Jeff, thank you for all you do for our profession. Oh my gosh, at every level, all over the country, keeping everybody up to date and being super excited about it. Key.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And to
Thanks
all
for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. And to all of our listeners out there, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcast, by all means, give us a 5-star rating and hopefully leave a couple comments. And if you're watching on YouTube, it'd be great if you'd become a subscriber. So, Jeff, we are going to send you a Dean's Chat cup, and we're going to add the little Bako insignia on the side.
Okay.
It takes all beverages, morning or night. Take your pick.
Okay.
Enjoy it. And until next week, everybody, cheers.